Thank you to Tim Heath, Chair of the Blake Society, for inviting me to talk to you all about my ceramic site-specific artwork and project entitled The Lamb at the Gate. I will come to the work a little later on, but first I thought I'd tell you something about another project to give a context for the work and to illustrate unconscious and literary psychogeography in my practice. I'm an art psychotherapist and artist. My art practice concerns site-responsive ceramic sculpture inspired by ritual, emotional and spiritual investment in objects, healing and power, and the historic resonance within places. My work involves research projects where the creative journey and process is often as important as the end product. I use photography and display linked to the context, research and development of the work, deliberately made with little financial cost and without commercial restriction. The work is then free to develop and be adapted. I make work on site or in my garden studio, favouring local found clay, minimal or no glaze, and natural organic materials. Increasingly, I'm thinking about the impact of artistic production, moving towards ephemerality and taking pictures of work in situ to record their temporality. This slide shows some of my artist in residence work at the Nessa Brodgar archaeological dig on the mainland of Orkney, the islands beyond mainland Scotland. I've had 3 residencies in Orkney, with last year being a virtual one. The works responded to the dig and look at all aspects of the making, design, firing, use and disposal of Neolithic grooved ware pots and potsherds, which are found in abundance at the site. I've been using the residency to think about place and the connection of the Ness to the Orkney landscape and the Neolithic sites around it. The Orkney raw clay works found in 2019 and Feast in 2018 reflect upon foraging for food and on the theme of gathering together for ritual and sharing. The Instagram posts Hallowed Earth imitate ritual deposition of objects, pots and baskets displayed and recorded around Orkney and seen in the excavation. Connected, last year's Instagram virtual residency looked more closely at designs, colouring and linkage to textiles. Back in 2016, I came across an image of 2 of Blake's engravings which he did for Josiah Wedgwood in 1817, alongside an accompanying letter. The images you can see in the background are in stark contrast to the visionary imagery Blake is famous for, and yet I could see that they held a sliver of his style, the flowing lines adding an animation to an otherwise static engraving. As a ceramicist, I connected to the images, but at the time I wasn't sure what response I might make to these tableware pictures. In 2017, whilst on my way to the British Museum to research Neolithic carved stone balls, I passed by the Swedenborg Society. For many years I worked nearby at the Mary Ward Centre, teaching an introduction to art therapy, and I knew about the work of the Swedenborg Society and their promotion of the arts linked to Emanuel Swedenborg. I called into the bookshop and spoke with Executive Director Stephen McNeely, asking if they might be interested in supporting a ceramic art project, combining the words and philosophy of Swedenborg with the Blake ceramic engraving. Providentially, Stephen mentioned that Wedgwood was also a Swedenborg follower, and just recently he'd been thinking about how to represent this with ceramics in their bookshop. This meeting and discussion then led to the project The Humble Servant. This was an exhibition of 4 ceramic pieces inspired by the William Blake engravings for Wedgwood's Queensware tableware pattern book, adorned with quotations from Swedenborg's writings and echoing the style of Blake's hand-coloured plates from his Lambeth poems. The ceramics replicate creamware of the period, with hand-applied coloured lead glaze and transfer printing. The commission originated in 1815, at a time when Blake's financial and public fortunes were at a low ebb. It's likely that Blake's good friend John Flaxman, one of the most significant artists employed by Wedgwood, and also a founding member of the Swedenborg Society, was the link for the engraving commission. One of the letters to Wedgwood shows Blake signing himself, "Your humble servant." An article in the Blake Society newsletter in 2018 about the research of Lewis and Carol Garrido in 2005, and permission being granted to mark the exact burial place of William Blake's grave in Bunhill Fields, inspired me to think of a ceramic art project to mark this event. I'd visited the grave marker for William and Catherine many times. I felt the installation of the new grave marker, commissioned from the Cardozo Kindersley workshop, would provide a unique opportunity to extract some clay from the ground during the proceedings, and from this create a clay memorial to William Blake for his final resting place. My proposal was to produce a delicate but life-size ceramic lamb. The lamb is often referenced by Blake as a symbol of the Lamb of God, Jesus Christ, and an indication of innocence and sacrifice. For me, the lamb at the gate alludes to a pastoral idyll, a forgotten Eden, and a return to a freer, simpler, less fraught existence, untarnished by negative influences, a relinquishing of earthly struggles and concerns. At the time of the proposal, I was unaware of the academic interpretation of Heaven's Gate as a spiritual passage or transformation. This is reflected upon in his poem, To the Queen, for Robert Blair's The Grave, and given a transcendent quality in the golden string, leading to Heaven's Gate in chapter 4 of Jerusalem to the Christians. My intention for the Lamb at the Gate captured something of my desire to release Blake from suffering, and to free myself, awaken to a simpler truth, something liberating, integrating emotion and imagination, accessing an earthly heaven through the songs of innocence, the Lamb. Very kindly, Tim Heath, chair, and Nick Duncan, one of the trustees of the Blake Society at the time, both agreed to my proposal, and we arranged to meet upon the anniversary of Blake's death, August 12th, at the unveiling of the engraved stone at Bunhill Fields in 2018. I would then be handed the soil and the contents removed from Bunhill Fields when the stone was recessed. Following the event, Nick Duncan introduced me to two of the apprentices from the Cardozo Kindersley workshop. They had a bag of the soil from Bunhill Fields. However, it was at their workshop in Cambridge, so I arranged a day and time to go and collect the bag a few weeks later. On arrival in Cambridge, I took some time to visit the Fitzwilliam Museum, hoping to see some of their William Blake collection. Sadly, during my visit, most were not accessible for viewing, only the print, "At length the hatching ripe he breaks the shell," from Gates of Paradise. As an image of transformation, out of death there is a birth, it works well as a symbol to think about the capacity of creativity to transfigure graveyard dirt to the new life of a ceramic spring lamb. During my visit, Lyda Cardozo generously gave of her time to show me round the letter-cutting workshop, a beautiful and inspiring place full of life and activity. I was excited to receive the bag of grave contents, but shocked to see there was no clay, but a predominance of bones and other fragments such as potsherds. I carefully packaged and double-bagged the contents into my backpack. Once home, the bag was put in my garden studio, and for many days and weeks it was as if the presence of Mr. Blake was reanimated in my Lambeth garden, despite my knowing that his corporal remains lay buried beneath 7 other bodies in the plot. However, the presence of the bones did give me concern, and I again contacted the Blake Society about the ethics of using this material. I was assured that as a nonconformist and religious dissenters' graveyard, which wasn't consecrated, I was legitimately able to use the material. However, I was still in need of clay to act as a vehicle for it. I considered that as London sits on a bed of clay, the site of William Blake's former home, 13 Hercules Road, Lambeth, might be able to supply the clay I needed. I took part in Blake's Lambeth walking tour with the writer and historian John Newman. During the tour, I found out that the Hercules Mansion council block had a weekend gardening group. I thought that this would be a perfect opportunity to engage with the residents, to tell them of the project, and dig for clay in the location of Blake's garden. After several disappointing attempts to contact the gardening club, I gave up. Disheartened, I began work with local Lambeth clay from my neighbour's garden and incorporated a small sample of the grave soil as an experiment. It worked well, and I was bolstered by this success to approach the Blake Society again to ask for their help. I wondered if it might be possible to obtain clay from the cottage in Felpham, Bognor Regis, West Sussex, where William and Catherine stayed between 1800 and 1803. Thrillingly, I was put in touch with Blake's cottage trustee at the time, Peter Johns, and we arranged a visit. Peter cautioned me that as the coastal cottage was built upon chalk soil rather than clay soil, I was unlikely to obtain clay, but this seemed like a minor inconvenience when presented with an opportunity to visit Felpham. This image shows the prototype grey stoneware lamb drying out slowly pre-firing, and then travelling on the train with a friend to sweet Felpham, for heaven is there, Blake's enthusiastic description of his new rented home as written to Anne Flaxman. The beach, sea and sky remain as exhilarating to see as they must have been for the Blakes, never having encountered the ocean before. Information boards around Bognor Regis and Felpham provide a thoughtful and rather beautiful summary of Blake's life, work and vision. For me, approaching the Flint cottage was a rather awesome moment. The village of Felpham has some notable historic points of interest in connection to Blake's time there. Not just the cottage, but the nearby Fox Inn, where Blake manhandled a drunken dragoon Schofield from the cottage garden back to his billet at the inn, and which ultimately led to Blake being charged with assault and sedition for saying "Damn the King of England." Also in the village is the 12th century St Mary's Church, a wall plaque to William Hayley, Flaxman's poet friend, who commissioned Blake's skill as an engraver and portrait painter, and whose patronage initially prompted William and Catherine's move to Felpham. However, Blake's work with Hayley was at odds with where Blake felt his skills lay, and even prior to his court case for sedition, he'd been planning to move back to London and was concerned about the effects of the damp cottage on Catherine's health. The view of the Grade 2 listed flint, cobbled, late 17th century cottage and garden is identifiable, with little change from Blake's illustration of it. I was offered the opportunity to collect some samples from the garden, which I did, close to the bare spot, underneath the windows to the right of the door next to a quince bush, illustrated with twiggy growth by Blake in his painting. Additionally, I photographed my prototype lamb in situ under the windows and by the door, looking rather pastoral next to the gardening equipment. We were then given a tour of the cottage and talked through the plans for its future and renovation, with various features pointed out. The roughly hewn tree trunk roof supports for the thatch, a beautifully early curved stairway, original casement windows downstairs at the back of the property, and the first floor bedroom with original floorboards, bedside cupboard, and cupboard latches, opposite the now restricted view which William and Catherine would have enjoyed, looking out towards the sea. Back in my home studio, I carried out some testing of the clay samples with inclusions in the form of a garden tag with Blake's monogram. so to provide a useful outcome for these experiments. I set about a second version of the lamb, softening its naturalistic look to better capture the essence of Blake's lamb illustrations. For the body of the lamb I used London clay, incorporating soil from the cottage and some of the sieved contents from the place of Blake's grave. In order to prepare for this, I separated out the larger contents first: glass, nails, ceramic and large stone. I also removed large and small stones to leave me with identifiable bone fragments from the sieved soil. I felt I needed to give due reverence to the bone fragments, and decided upon a relic-like inclusion to the lamb to hold some bone pieces. Although not part of the initial proposal, this element of death within the body of the newborn lamb echoes something of nativity paintings, where the crucifix lurks in the shadows, the cycle of life and death combined, eternal life. Finally, the lamb was ready to be placed by William Blake's grave to be photographed in situ, resting by the memorial in Bunhill Fields. The lamb at the gate was finalised and recorded, posting on Instagram on the anniversary of his death, 12th of August, a year on from the project inception. During the writing of this presentation, I came across the importance of the Fetter Lane Moravian Chapel in the City of London. William's mother, Catherine, was a member of the congregation, so too Swedenborg in its early days. So perhaps I shouldn't have been so surprised to see the lamb with the flag of victory is their emblem. Thank you all for listening to my journey of creation, with its joy and diversions, setbacks and fulfilment. A huge thank you to the many members of the Blake Society who have gently supported me along the way. I am your humble servant.